Good evening, welcome to TVB News. Concerns grew on Monday that the ceasefire between the US and Iran might collapse. This after Washington said it had seized an Iranian cargo ship that tried to run its blockade, and Iran vowed to retaliate. Iranian state media reported Tehran had rejected new peace talks, citing the ongoing blockade, threatening rhetoric, and Washington's shifting positions and excessive demands. Daniel Rao tells us more.
The US military said it fired on an Iranian-flagged cargo ship headed towards Iran's Bandar Abbas port on Sunday after a 6-hour standoff, disabling its engines. US Central Command said American Marines then rappelled from helicopters onto the vessel. US President Donald Trump later said Washington has full custody of the ship and is seeing what's on board. Iran's military said the ship had been travelling from China. It warned it will soon respond and retaliate against this armed piracy by the US military. The news threw into question Trump's earlier announcement US negotiators would head to Pakistan on Monday for another round of talks with Iran. The talks had raised hopes of extending a fragile ceasefire set to expire by Wednesday. Iranian state media reported Tehran had rejected new peace talks, citing the ongoing blockade, threatening rhetoric, and Washington's shifting positions and excessive demands. The war has put commercial vessels in the crossfire of the regional war. Several tankers have been targeted in attacks carried out by Iranian forces and allied groups. Dan Harrell, TV News.
Some residents of Wentworth Court began returning to their flats and retrieved belongings 5 months after the devastating fire. They described mixed feelings about seeing the condition of their homes. Samantha Lee reports.
After nearly 5 months of displacement, residents of the 7 fire-ravaged buildings were given 3-hour windows to return. About 270 residents of Wansan House were the first group to ascend, coming with large suitcases, red, white, and blue bags, and grocery trolleys. Many raced to reclaim as much as possible before the clock ran out. Despite her limited mobility, an old lady took the chance to bid farewell to her old home. Returning to a beloved home only to find ash and debris is heartbreaking beyond words. Stephen Jung barely slept last night. He admitted he was quite nervous, but at the same time, he felt a sense of relief and a small glimmer of hope. Going together with his wife, son, and a friend, Stephen set off early this morning. They brought along plastic bags, scissors, screwdrivers, and wore slip-resistant shoes. The squad also prepared a checklist and assigned roles to each person to make every minute count. I wish to retrieve my marriage certificate and my computer that stored photos of my son's childhood, said Joe. As they walked up to their home on a lower floor, they found the condition was not as bad as they imagined. Windows were broken, stairs were blackened, but we managed to go up. Fortunately, our home was largely unscathed. Some pieces of furniture, however, were covered with ashes and some kind of concrete-like liquid, said Jung. Apart from the items they planned to collect, Stephen also salvaged a mandala painting, which protected his home in the inferno, he believes. Residents of Wansan House will continue to return in batches until Wednesday, while Wanchuan House, Wanyan House, and Wantao House will go from next Wednesday. Samantha Lee, TVB News.
Deputy Chief Secretary Wonachek noted while there are no limits on how many times a resident can return, the prerequisite is that they must stick to their assigned slots. This after some residents appealed for greater flexibility. Some 1,000 civil servants, such as police officers, emergency responders, CAT team volunteers, were deployed at the site to assist residents going back to their fire-damaged homes. Top officials, including Wonachek, Secretary for Housing Winnie Ho, Secretary for Home and Youth Affairs Alice Mark, arrived to oversee the operation. Speaking to the press this morning, Chuk said residents are allowed to make more than one trip to their units. He did not restrict the number of trips, but said 3 times would be considered reasonable. Meanwhile, teams of clinical psychologists and social workers were stationed on site to help residents who may need emotional support. And still ahead, one court committee member alleges rigged proxy votes. 8 children dead in latest US mass shooting. And Pope Leo's Mass in Angola draws more than 100,000 faithfuls. Welcome back. A former member of the One for Court's Incorporated Owners Management Committee claimed abusive proxy applications had taken place in meetings. Mimosa Ngai reports.
The public hearing continued at Central City Gallery. The committee heard from one witness on the Monday session, Gong Chen-Fat, a 2-term former management committee member of One for Court's Incorporated Owners, or IO. Kong highlighted the issue of proxy votes, saying he had failed to get elected in the IO's elections multiple times because the members had some sort of agreement among them. He recalled Peggy Wong, the DAB district councillor and former consultant to the estate, arrived with her volunteers at a meeting in January 2024 when Prestige Construction and Engineering was selected as the contractor. Kong said a dispute broke out between an owner and Wong's volunteers to the extent that police were alerted. In the end, 500 votes were counted, but Kong said only 200 owners attended the meeting. Kong suspected a rigging took place in a vice-chairman election in 2024, in which he also ran. While he was the first person to raise his hand, Kong said he was entered as the number 2 candidate. A resident who oversaw the voting process later informed him that many of the ballots had prevailed number 1. Kong eventually lost the election. Kong became a member of the old IO in May 2024, but he felt isolated in a group under the leadership of the former chairman, Tan Kwok-keum. He got re-elected as a committee member in September 2024 when Choi Moon-kum became the new chairman. Kong told the independent committee that the old IO didn't pass on any information to its successor. When Kong asked Tan why he didn't do so, Tan's reply was, "You dismissed us, it's up to you now." The committee heard that Kong had made complaints to the building's department's independent checking unit in October, which was about a month before the fire, regarding the safety of the estate's scaffolding mesh. Victor Dawes, the committee's senior counsel, showed an email reply from the ICU on November 24th, 2 days before the tragedy, which said authorities would closely monitor the safety situation of the worksite. Before the hearing ended, a signed cost estimate report from the estate's renovation consultant, Willpower, was displayed. Dated in September 2022, the signature belonged to Willpower's founder, a man surnamed Shum, but an obituary showed that Shum had passed away in July that year. The committee said some witnesses will be required to testify in May due to the time needed to organize new statements received in the past 2 weeks. Mimosa Ngai, TVB News.
Another air disturbance is sweeping across the coast of Guangdong, leaving Hong Kong with unsettled weather. An overcast sky hangs over the central pier. This as the disturbance is affecting the region. At 2:30 p.m, the Hong Kong Observatory issued a special alert, warning that the northern New Territories may be lashed by violent gusts. During the storm, Lau Fao Shan recorded peak gusts of around 30 kilometers per hour. In the next couple of days, local weather will become unstable with showers. The Drainage Services Department on Monday presented some new robots to help clean sewage as Hong Kong is about to enter the rainy season. And take a look at these 2 newly introduced robots by the department. This robot can sweep away obstacles within the drains in a few seconds. And this robot, meanwhile, can reach down 5 meters within a sewage manhole to remove obstacles. Speaking to the media, the department's director, Ringo Mok, said the cost of each of those machines was about $300,000. He said the robots are electronic, meaning they don't require fuel. Apart from applying new technology, the department said they had inspected and cleaned 240 flooding black spots. Other anti-flooding measures include trainings for the department's emergency control center staff. In the U.S. state of Louisiana, a gunman killed 8 children and left 2 women injured, including his wife, in a shooting tied to a domestic disturbance early Sunday. The incident was the country's deadliest mass shooting in 2 years. The community laid flowers outside the single-story house on the 79th Street in Shreveport, a city in the northwestern part of Louisiana, and held a candlelight vigil in a nearby parking lot Sunday evening. Dozens of mourners, hugging and consoling one another, held back tears as they remembered the children killed. Kimberly Jackson, who is a mother and grandmother herself, said, "It just makes you take your children and hug them and tell them how much you love them."
To learn later that I knew one of the children, it really took a toll on me. And I really hate that for the mama period and those children.
Unfortunately, the tragedy bringing us together. I mean, I wish we could just come together without the tragedy.
A Louisiana father has fatally shot 8 children, 7 of them his own, in a domestic attack in a Shreveport neighborhood before sunrise. The gunman was identified as 31-year-old Shama Elkins, who died after a car chase and interaction with police that ended with officers firing on him. Police said the man opened fire at a home south of downtown, then drove to the second location. 3 boys and 5 girls were killed inside the second house. Some of them tried to get away through the back door.
Our officers responded, located the scene, located the 8 individuals, the children that were dead, and they tried to provide aid where they could, but ultimately were unable to save any of them. There was a child that jumped off the roof. We were able to get him to a hospital, and he is expected to survive. There's also 2 adult females that were injured during this mass shooting. They are both in critical condition. We are hopeful that they will survive. One is significantly more critical than the other.
Elkins and his wife were said to be in the middle of separating, and the couple were due in court on Monday. According to a relative of the family, Elkins had 4 kids with his wife and 3 kids with another woman living nearby that was also shot in the attack. Officials said the assailant had been arrested in a firearms case in 2019, but they were not aware of any other domestic violence issues linked to Elkins. Pope Leo XIV has celebrated Holy Mass on the 3rd Sunday of Easter in the African country of Angola, to offer a message of encouragement and prayed for a permanent ending of hostilities in the Middle East. Pope Leo XIV is on an 11-day apostolic journey in Africa, characterized by repeated appeals for peace. On Sunday morning, Angolans cheered as he passed them on the Popemobile and presided over an open-air mass in Quilamba, a Chinese-built urban development on the outskirts of Luanda city. For many faithful flocking to the arena, it's the first time that they saw the Holy Father face-to-face. The celebration, held in the presence of an estimated 100,000 people, was enriched by readings and hymns and culminated in Leo's homily.
Irmãos e irmãs.
He addressed Angola's civil war-scarred past and denounced the exploitation of the people and their mineral-rich land. The pontiff said, "We wish to build a country where old divisions are overcome once and for all, where hatred and violence disappear, and where the scourge of corruption is healed by a new culture of justice and sharing." At the end of his mass, Leo said the ceasefire between Israel and Hezbollah was a sign of relief for the Lebanese, praying it would bring permanent peace to the Middle East. The first United States-born pope then traveled by helicopter to the town of Mushama, where a church overlooks a river that was once a major route for African slave trade during Portugal's colonial rule. He prayed the rosary at a Catholic shrine known as the Sanctuary of Mama Mushama, a pilgrimage destination after believers reported an appearance by the Virgin Mary around 1833. Leo, whose own ancestors include enslaved people and slave owners, records the sorrow and great suffering that the Angolan people endured for centuries, without referring specifically to slavery. He called on people to build a better, more welcoming world where there are no wars, injustices, poverty or dishonesty. A centre-left coalition led by ex-President Rumen Radev is ready to win Bulgaria's parliamentary election, as suggested by an exit poll. However, the votes for Radev may not be enough for him to rule alone, which could prolong the country's political deadlock. The election on Sunday was the country's 8th in 5 years. The vote followed the resignation of a conservative-led government and nationwide protests last year. Radev said the country needs to be pragmatic.
You should know that Bulgaria will pay efforts to continue its European path, but believe me, strong Bulgaria in strong Europe needs critical thinking, needs pragmatism, because Europe has fallen a victim to its own ambition to be a moral leader in a world without rules. So what Europe needs right now is again critical thinking, pragmatic actions and good results, especially building a new security architecture and paying a lot of efforts to recover its industrial power and competitiveness. That will be the main contribution of Bulgaria to its European mission.
Tens of thousands of Japanese citizens gathered before the National Diet Building on Sunday, voicing opposition to the policy shifts under the current administration led by Prime Minister Sanai Takaichi. Protesters carried banners and chanted slogans condemning moves to relax Japan's restrictions on arms exports and revise the country's post-war pacifist constitution. The current rules laid out in Japan's 3 principles on transfer of defense equipment and technology limit its defense equipment exports to give non-combat purposes. But Takaichi's government is considering revising the implementation guidelines for the 3 principles and removing these restrictions, which in principle allows exports of lethal weapons to other countries. Artists who participate in Eurovision 2026 are set to keep the annual music event out of politics and focus on spreading love. It is an important stop in the run-up to the finals in May as fans make up their minds to support and enjoy a showcase of 2026 acts. 35 countries are competing in this year's Eurovision Song Contest, though Iceland, Ireland, the Netherlands, Slovenia and Spain are all boycotting due to discord over Israel's participation. This year's semi-finals and grand final will be held in Austria as they won the Crystal microphone last year. At the moment, Finland's Linda Lampinius and Pete Pakunen are leading the odds with a combination of pop vocals and violins. And that's the news. Thank you for watching.